Welcome back to the Dev Different podcast. I'm Tanner Lytle here with CodeBuddy CEO Devin Seacrest. How we doing, my man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on our podcast, Tanner.
Yeah, well, you and I very rarely get to do it. It's usually
Yeah.
Hunter talking technical, so this week we're doing something a little bit different, and I feel long overdue. One of the biggest questions we get from new aspiring founders is, what does it mean to truly build an MVP? And I know you've put together this large workbook packet that's available on our website called Building an MVP: How Ugly Leads to Billion-Dollar Companies. So I'm excited to dive into that with you.
Absolutely. Excited to share. Every company is different. Every company, uh, you know, defines and achieves success in different ways. But we wanted to put together some of the stories that we've learned from other developers, other companies that have gone out and been very successful, and kind of what are the unknown hacks that they did to really get there. And so, first thing I want to start with is this is not just our experience. So I've probably met with over 100 entrepreneurs over my lifetime on this. We collected a ton of data from them, asked them several different questions about how they achieved success, how they built out their product. Most are software products, especially because that's what we do here at CodeBuddy. So, yeah, I'm just going to go and jump in and do the thing. So we've got kind of 5 different chapters in this presentation. The first one is on ugly is good. The second one is defining what we call the audience of the future. Third one being Wizard of Oz. Fourth one being pencil to code. And then fifth one being will they come. And you can see these last 3 chapters, what they're really centered around is 3 core things that you want to achieve when you're building a new company. The first one is being desirability, and these are in the exact order too as well. So the first thing you want to achieve is desirability. So are people willing to put skin into what you're offering? The second one is feasibility. So can you feasibly deliver that to them? You can say I want to go to the moon, but if you can't actually get them to the moon, you might not as well test the desirability of that. And then the third one is profitability. So can you make it profitable delivering it to them? A lot of people try to push profitability way too early. In the early stages, investors, companies, employees, they're really looking first to see, all right, is this something people will want, and can we feasibly deliver it to them?
So the goal of the MVP is really to test out all 3 of those things, right? Are people willing to open up their wallets to purchase it because the value is there? Can you actually build the thing and deliver upon it? And I guess, can you make money on it is kind of the biggest things you're looking for, right?
Absolutely. And, the word MVP is thrown out there with so many different, definitions to it as well. Some people think MVP is just desirability, which, you can make a strong argument for that, of just building something to test whether or not people would want it. And some people, define MVP as, the full stage of, finding desirability, determining that you can build it, and then also making sure that you can scale it and build it out to a process where it will also be very profitable.
Yeah, and this isn't like the meme good, quick, and cheap comes into play where you have to pick 2. This is something that you want all 3, because we've seen in the past people spend a lot of money, have something that they can build, but no one wants to buy it. Or they create something, they stumble upon something that people really, really want, but the technology is just not ready yet to deliver upon it.
Correct. Yes, and you want them in order, like I said. So you don't have to achieve all 3 at once. It's like, all right, tackle this one, and tackle this one. So we talked a little bit about research methods, but all the companies we met with before, some of the things that we kind of learned in this study is, 86% of companies are spending over $100,000 on their first product. And then 91% of those companies that did that are no longer using the code that they first developed. So you see this very big pattern of companies spending a lot of money early on their first product and then completely throwing it away because they learned something. They had this big aha moment. There was this big validation, and then they had to rewrite the code. And then the last really good statistic we got out of this was the average company has pivoted 3.6 times before they hit product market fit. So
See, that's just crazy to me. Absolutely crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, so many times you think you stumble upon that great idea, and of course it's going to work out exactly like you envision it, but you change 3.6 times. So even the pivot of the pivot of the pivot is maybe the one that lands, right?
Correct. Correct. And that's why, people always ask me for advice on like whether or not I like the idea they're going after. And I never like try to play judge on that because most companies, it's not the first idea. It's the ones that are successful are the ones that go from, idea to validation to that aha moment to the next idea to validation aha moment. And a lot of times the final idea, there are traces of that existing vision or thought in there from the beginning, but most of the time there's like a complete difference in what they're doing. So yeah, the key takeaway for this entire presentation early on is just try not to spend lots of money on your product until you really know what your customer will purchase, and that you can build it and that you can be profitable from that too as well. All right, jumping in. So we like to call this the biggest mistake. Which is companies trying to build the Ferrari of products or services when you don't even know your customer wants a sports car. So we get a lot of companies that try to like come in with this like these beautiful mock-ups. Everything is like perfectly pixel perfect. In there, they've got like a year of development work that they're trying to build after. And the problem with this is that, three things are guaranteed to happen. First of all, you'll likely run out of money before you even build something that drives straight. Second of all, the legacy companies, like the Ferraris of the world, they have decades of experience to crush you in what you're doing. And then thirdly is you'll probably discover that the future customers don't even want that sports car anymore. They're going to want something very different as well. So the key takeaway here is just, what we call start ugly and work your way to beautiful. So first try to validate and then really refine it. This is how we think the pros do it. And again, this is all just our personal experience talking to entrepreneurs, looking at the successful companies that are out there in the world. And we'll share a ton of case studies in this presentation with you about those. But find the cheapest, dirtiest, like nasty way to, create and build and test your product before spending money. And what happens when you do that is three things, is that you will learn whether the future customer wants your offering, you'll preserve enough cash, and you'll use your data from what you've learned to actually raise more cash, and you'll build something that even the most privileged legacy companies cannot even compete against. And so why ugly is good. People give you more accurate feedback when you're ugly, and you conserve enough cash to build what your future customer wants. And when I say ugly, I mean the product. I mean, not ugly like me, but...
Well, it's a big barrier, right? Because when you're starting off, you feel like it represents you a little bit, and you have to disconnect from that. You're really just trying to prove the feasibility of whatever workflows or functions or value proposition is within the application, and it's not necessarily reflecting on you.
Absolutely. There's like this ego that when we go out and build the product, we need to be able to sell the product to like those Fortune 500 companies that like are only going to buy something if it's pixel perfect and like everything is perfectly working. But the reality is like early on in the initial stages, you hit the mark. Like it's exactly, you're really just trying to validate functionality and what you're actually building and what the actual customer wants and what that like, not what that existing like customer wants, but what the new customers of the world want.
Yeah, and people put up with a lot of really ugly user experience, let's say, as long as the value is there. I mean, if it's going to turn $1 into $2, I don't care what it looks like. I just want that. And you just really want to stumble upon what is it that people are truly desiring, what can they get a good ROI on, or what is high value for them, and what are they willing to metaphorically open their wallets up for.
Correct. You hit it on the mark there. So we jump into some case studies. So why, ugly is good. And so we start to look at a lot of these companies that are very familiar in people's, minds and how they originally started. So Amazon, if you're old enough, you will recognize this, but Amazon did not start as this mega marketplace of every single product. Amazon started, they only sold books. Their website was garbage. It was literally just a static HTML site where they, listed the books on those sites. Half the times that they actually uh, didn't even have those books purchased. They had arranged this like pre-purchase book option with a lot of these massive booksellers. So you would buy it and they would get it, and then they would actually ship it to you as well. The next one, Dropbox too as well. Dropbox actually, when they first released, their site didn't even work. It was literally just a page with a email form saying, "Hey, we've got this great new technology where you can store and share files. If you want to be a part of this, put your email here. We'll get you added to that wait list." So again, the ability to take something that probably took them an hour to build and using that to test a product rather than feeling that you have to build that whole technology before you actually release it. Another good case study is Twitter. Twitter's original concept was literally just a text field where you could type your message into that field. I don't know if they sent it out or if it just sent it to their internal team, and then I think their internal team went out and actually distributed it out to all of the members that were on some sort of actual user list with what they were doing. So the next section is audience of the future. So this is how Kodak went from being the largest film company in the world to filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. How did they miss out on the digital camera revolution? And the thing that happened with Kodak is that they were selling to professional photographers. And they were selling film, which even to date, film is still higher quality than digital photography. So why didn't Kodak just simply invent a digital camera and sell to all the digital photographers in the world, or sell to the professional photographers too as well? One of the reasons why is that they would have had to disrupt their own revenue model. Because they were selling, film, and photographers were buying film every day, every week, it was an incredibly profitable model for them. So they said, hey, we don't want to get into this digital photography. Why would we give the film away for free instead of being able to charge those? You had these digital photography companies that came out, and they were selling a product that was not great quality, but what they discovered is if they sold it to amateur photographers, what they could do is those amateur photographers could take as many photos as they want. And instead of having to get that one photo just right, they could take 1,000 photos. And out of those 1,000 photos would be some great photo that they had. And what happens is that over time, the digital camera actually became, better and better quality until today you can barely notice the difference. And those digital camera companies actually disrupted Kodak. So entrepreneurs out there is hope. If you invent something and you're afraid that the big, mammoth companies are going to come in and steal your idea, there is hope. And the way you do it is you find the new audience of the future, the audience that the, existing legacy companies would never want to go after because it would completely disrupt their existing business model. So now the question is, how do you disrupt an industry? So it's impossible to compete with the large companies that have been working in your industry for decades longer than you. It's like you saying, I'm going to build the next Ferrari, with $100 in your pocket. How are you going to beat out the existing Ferraris, Ducatis of the world? Here's how you hack the system. First thing you do is you find the low value customers that corporations ignore. So like in the digital photography space, those, Kodak ignored the amateur photographers because the professional photographers were paying them so much money. It's like, why should we even sell to those amateur photographers? The next thing is serve those customers with a lower quality technology. This is what we call the, ugly is good, ugly is better. Because what happens is you can slowly improve that technology over time. But with a lower technology quality, the reason people will adopt it is because you're going to have something that's slightly different than what's already out there. In the digital camera example, you can take as many photos as you want. So that's a difference, even though the photos are lower quality at the time than professionals. Professionals aren't going to want that because they're going to say, I'm going to take time to take just, that right photo. And then thirdly is you improve the technology over time. So people are patient, as long as you've got, people wanting the product, desiring the product, you've got investors, helping you, bringing you money so that you can, ride that tide. You improve the technology in time until your technology is either not any different noticeably or has surpassed the previous technology in terms of performance and quality. And then last, you sit back and you wait for others to compete. And they're going to try to compete against you and introduce something. But if you've got the like grassroots brand and, effort behind you, you will succeed. How to find low value customers. I'm not going to go over all of these, but we've got them up here. Like we said, like we were talking Tanner earlier, you got to sometimes drop that ego. You can't, feel like you've got the best product out there. It's like, just get something that's working, that's functional. Ask yourself who else could benefit if, the camera was, cheaper, faster, could take 1,000 photos. Be humble, fall in love with the problem, not the products or solutions. Trust what you see customers do, not what you hear them saying they want to do. Don't try to sell to everyone. Niches get riches. Have a healthy regard for what's impossible. Something might come out that in a year from now or a month from now might make what you thought was previously impossible now possible. We're seeing a lot of that with the new LLM models being released. Disregard what people say. A lot of people don't want to come off as incompetent, so they might not tell you they've got a problem when they actually do have a problem. So again, it goes back to, trust what you see, not what you hear. Realize that your solution may be worse. Like we said, it might be lower quality. Hire young people. Young people have a really good ability to ignore what's impossible and think of what is going to be that next audience of the future. And then always, change your product or market. So if you're not getting that product market fit, it's always, they say it's always better to change the product to fit the market than to try to find a market. But sometimes you got to go find a new market out there too as well. Okay, so to wrap this section up on desirability. So what we're really trying to test in this first section is, what is the easiest way to test whether people will take a personal stake or involvement in your product and service? We've got a little checklist here, which is, make sure you're addressing one key audience, one problem at the time. If you get lots of people to put cash, time, or reputation in your product, that demonstrates success. And then make sure you're spending 0 to 5% your cash on hand on this first section. So when you are testing out desirability, do not spend $100,000. You can test out desirability spending, little to no money, and we will show you how you can do that. Another thing that we got from our research group too is, remember that skin in the game is customers putting cash, time, or reputation into your product. It is not investors putting money into your product or people saying they will buy your product. Cash is king.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs skip a lot of these steps because they're so eager to get the money, to make it official, to start building the real things, quote unquote. But you're right on the money. It's truly the research before you start writing the book or building the product or doing anything. It's the true first principles understanding of what problem you're trying to solve, who is it for, and is there actually a market for it? So I love what you were saying too. And just to piggyback off of, well, that market's already saturated, or how could I compete against these Goliaths in industry in whatever field you're going after? And the reality is they're often just too blind and too slow to move to it. You might truly see something that is only you or a small relative pool of people might be noticing at this time. And if you can find that right solution and verify that with the users, then you're ready to build. And sometimes the building even goes quicker than this research part, because you could find a problem, but again, the technology might not be ready yet. So you could be holding on to this idea for years, but you never really let go off of it because you have that right research and the right understanding. So when the tech gets there, bam, it's time to launch.
Yep. So what are some good ways to build or to test desirability before you spend $100,000? And here's what we've got in this next section to give you some good ways of doing so. The first one is one of our favorites. We love it. We call it the Wizard of Oz. So in this term is what a user interacts with what appears to be fully functioning system, but certain parts of the system are actually operating behind the scenes. So it's that, wizard is behind the scenes pulling the strings on this. A great example is Zappos. So Zappos is a shoe company that they started out and, now $1 billion business. But the way they started is they literally just went around to shoe stores and they took pictures of those shoes and they put it up on a static, website with some prices on those shoes. And people would go to the website, they would buy the shoes. The person working at Zappos would have to go back to the shoe store, purchase the shoe in the exact size of those customers, go to FedEx, ship the shoes to that customers. The customers may return some because it was the wrong size. They'd have to go back and forth. And what happened is they lost a lot of money in that process. But what they did is they validated a $1 billion idea. So again, they were able to test desirability first to see, oh yes, people are willing to purchase shoes online, but without having to try them on, in the store. Eventually they figured out the systems and the logistics around having, all the shoes in stock, being able to ship the shoes out as well, and they figured out the profitability. But early on, it was just all about testing that desirability.
Yeah. The other great thing that this example shows is that you don't have to be profitable right away. Again, you're almost using these customers on the website. They're almost paying you in a way in terms of information. Like, is this valuable to me? So the fact that you're spending, which truly is a small amount of money, you might think like, oh, I'm losing $20 or $30 every time I get an order. I'm going to be bankrupt. And you're like, well, in reality, you're spending thousands or maybe tens of thousands to go in and, like you said, launch $1 billion business. You're not spending hundreds or millions of dollars trying to build out all the infrastructure and buy all the product and do all this stuff just to launch a website that no one buys shoes from.
Correct. Yeah, a lot, the high growth investors that you're going after in, when you're trying to create a company like Zappos, they look at that revenue number. And if you tell them you're breaking even, they almost look at it fishy and it's like, what are you doing wrong here? If you're breaking even, shouldn't you be going after something big enough that requires, a massive influx of cash early on with, high reward and high upside later. Another good way of testing desirability is simple landing pages. So this is like a Wizard of Oz, but you're not really doing any functionality. You're just creating a landing page where people can have a button to learn more, so they can actually see what you're working on, and they have some sort of mechanism to indicate that they're interested in what you're actually doing. So it's not as great as Wizard of Oz because you can't usually sell at this point unless you're trying to pre-sell for an actual service, but a great example of this is Spotify. So when Spotify first got started, they didn't even have an actual music app. They just had a landing page describing like the unique way they were going to sell music via a day pass with what they were doing. They got enough interest, raised enough money that they were then able to actually build out that platform and be, one if not the largest music platform on the internet right now. Similar to landing pages, but these are just video landing pages. So this is actually how Dropbox got started. Is they actually they had the technology built, but they didn't have the technology built where people could easily access it via the web. So what they did is they just created a video showing their computers sharing files between different computers and the other computer being able to access that file too as well. And yeah, their wait list grew from $5,000 to $75,000 in just one day. That just freaking blows.
Yeah, if you get a
mind.
video that goes viral for whatever reason, you can
Correct.
get a lot of exposure.
Videos are huge, especially in today's age. The next way that you can test desirability without actually having to build out a full product is concierge or consultation. So this is pretty much, providing the product or service in the way of a human doing all the work. So if you, say, want to build some sort of, accounting software or tax software, and you've got a background in accounting or, what's a tax person? An
Yep.
accountant or
An
accountant, right?
accountant. Yeah.
Yeah. If you got an accounting background, what you do is you first consult. So you just provide your labor as the product or service. You work with customers. You use it as internal research to figure out, all right, what am I spending my most time on? Like, what is all the labor I'm spending? And then determining, all right, how are ways that we can automate that labor into an actual product or service. You also get early revenue, which is always great to help fund, bootstrap your company too as well. Palantir is a great story of concierge or consultation. So Palantir, Peter Thiel, one of the PayPal like mafia co-founders with Elon Musk, started Palantir. So they're a consulting agency that specializes in data analysis and intelligence. They do a lot of security, a lot of defense work. They were involved in capturing Osama bin Laden supposedly. But they started literally just doing like data analysis and consulting work to actual customers. Nowadays, they have these very sophisticated products that they sell to government agencies, and our billion-dollar company right now. Crowdfunding is another way of testing desirability before you actually build. So another thing where you don't have to spend a lot of money on products. You can go to a crowdfunding site. You can create your own website site too as well. PopSocket is a great story of this. Everyone knows the PopSocket, but early on they did a Kickstarter campaign. I think they only raised like $18,000 with 520 backers, but now their revenue is doing $200 million a year right now, and that was in 2018. So I'm sure they're doing way more right now. And then another one is competitor testing. So if you're trying to build a software that is a better version of another software, instead of you spending a lot of money to create that better version and then test it, an easy hack is you can go and you can just find that competitor, that existing product that you hate and you want to replace, and test that with users and help them understand, like, see what their problems do they have the same problems as you. So what you're really trying to test is there a desirability of a better solution or desirability of a fix to a certain thing that is really lacking in one product, and you're really able to do that by using the other products as an example, or hell, go try to sell the other products. Don't do anything unethical, but great way to actually test desirability, validate what you're trying to do, build out what you need to actually build without having to spend a lot of money. Okay, and then feature stub. So this is a good one of putting a product or service that doesn't actually exist on a website to see if someone will buy it. So the idea of you've got an existing website that you're already selling something and you're trying to see, all right, should we, expand into something else? And so you literally just put a button of, the new product or idea there with a new, buy now button, and people click on it, and you either say, oh, this is coming in, 2026, we're not ready yet, but put your name on a list, or, oh no, we ran out. There's what we call the legendary muffin salesperson, which is a story about a muffin salesperson or a great baker that wanted to start a muffin business. And so what he did is he literally just got his bicycle with a little basket in front of his bicycle, put a sign on it that said muffins are for sale, and he drove around to universities or college campuses, and he would scream out muffins for sale, and he would say $5, and he would go around different places, and someone would come up and they'd be like, oh yes, I'd like to buy your muffin, and he'd open his basket and he'd say, oh no, I just sold out of muffins, you'll have to come back. Dude never had any muffins in his basket, but what he was really just trying to do is trying to decide, would people buy muffins? Would they buy muffins at the price he set muffins? And where were the best locations that he could sell? He would literally go to different locations on the campus or different areas. And it is like the ancient idea of a feature stub of, putting something on there that you don't actually have, but really testing to see if someone wants it. And then piecemeal, which is just a combination of, existing technologies to mimic the product or service. The example here is Twitter, where Twitter just put like an input box on to put something that you want to text to the entire Twitter community, and they would literally just take that and then they would just go and use a SMS service, and they would actually send it out. Nothing was actually automated when they first started, but eventually over time they were automating that. But there's the idea, there's already all like these ton of existing services out there, email, text, that if you're trying to do some sort of communication platform, can you just hack it together with existing technologies before you build out something that's already automated? Okay, so that, like we said, wraps up desirability. Now what we're on to is feasibility. So people want your dream. The question is, can you deliver it? So you've done one of those things that we just mentioned in the last section, Wizard of Oz, or piecemeal, or landing pages, and you had great success. People were flocking to it. Now the question is can you feasibly build that? And the success here, again, you just want to address one key audience, one problem, and one feature. You also want to usability test it at this solution. Usability testing is one of the great ways to see, all right, have you feasibly created what you're doing? And now is at the point where you can spend a little more cash. Because in order to test feasibility, you actually have to go out there and build something functional. So, the biggest takeaway from at this level is like failing to usability test what you're building. So, how do you get that first cash to test feasibility? Because this stage is not cheap. The first stage is cheap. You can do that literally with no money. So we list out some of the best and worst ways entrepreneurs raise money, such as pre-sales. There's a lot of government grants out there, crowdfunding, pitch competitions, investors, accelerators are great, local angels, local venture capital, local corporations, economic development programs. There's revenue-based financing too as well. A lot of companies get built on what I'm going to say now are the worst ways to raise money, which is personal guaranteed loans, credit cards, your own savings, your annoying uncle, like aggressive venture capital firms too as well. So it's not saying that you can't do those, but obviously the left side is much better. So, and try not to spend your own cash too as well. You as an entrepreneur are going to be putting so much skin in the game. You're going to be taking a lesser salary. You're going to be staying up late nights and weekends when you've got kids running around and screaming in the household. You are putting your sweat equity into the road. And by getting other people's money, and it's another form of validating. It's not as good as sales, but it's another form of validating and getting people to follow your vision. So, how do you take an idea that you can say people are desiring, and how do you actually put pencil to code? One of the things we always strongly recommend is that people always start with pencil and paper. And the reason pencil and paper is better than just jumping into like a Figma mock-up or an Adobe Illustrator mock-up too as well, is because when something's on pencil and paper, it's easier to throw away and sketch the next design. And it's also easier for someone to tell you that they don't like your design when it's on pencil and paper. If you have like this high resolution mock-up that you spent hours and hours in creating, it's much harder psychologically to throw that away and go to something else. Or it's much harder to show that to someone else and for them to say, I hate this. And the reason why is because they know you spent 100 hours working on it. They don't want to offend you. So early on, start in pencil and paper. You'll feel comfortable throwing it away and easily sketching out a better version. And instead of spending 100 hours on that better version, you spend a minute getting to that next better version. And you'll get better feedback from people when your stuff looks rough. So we've literally had products where we've actually built the things out, but actually gone and showed people on pencil and paper because we wanted that rougher feedback than them seeing that we had already built it out and feeling like, oh, I don't like this, but I'm not going to tell them. So pencil and paper, big things. And then the next evolutions are rolling here. Do black and white wireframes. Start drawing use case stories for the requirements. A use case is just literally like, as a user, I want to be able to do this so that I can, receive some value. And then you move on to high resolution mockups using like a Figma or Adobe XD, and then start actually building out the product too as well. So the biggest mistake in this level is just waiting till you have high resolution mockups or products to test. People are more likely to give you honest feedback when things look ugly and unfinished.
I feel like a trap that is happening today all the time is Figma is getting more and more feature rich, and you can almost feel like you have a real app because you can play it like a real app. You're like, here's my mobile version, here's my desktop version, and it tells that story, but again, it is very, very time consuming. And if it's too pretty, again, you're not going to get that raw, unfiltered answer most of the time because, again, most of your people you talk to are probably going to be your friends or in your networks, and they're not going to want to risk offending you because they're like, oh man, they must have spent months on this or spent a lot of money hiring someone to do this for them. Yeah, it looks great. But at the end of the day, they're not going to open their wallet. They're not going to use it. They're not going to put their own, livelihoods on the line to use this app. Perhaps they're just going to be nice to you. But if it was just a piece of paper and you're like, yeah, what if we did this? They're going to be like, tear it apart. And that's what's great about it.
If you got it on a napkin, they're going to say, oh, that's great. But then they're going to grab another napkin and say, hey, but what if you did this? And start sketching out like additional opportunities. And maybe that's great. Maybe those are garbage. But
and they
if
can't
you don't do that,
with
you
Figma.
don't get those.
They can't. They can't just like grab the mouse cursor away from you and then redesign everything. But by God, they can grab another napkin, grab another piece of paper, draw all over what you have. Just be like, wouldn't it be cool if it did this? If it did this? And then all of that is probably way more valuable information than like, wow, this looks pretty. Wow, this looks cool.
Yep. So, okay, how do you build that software product? So you're still in feasibility. You're at the stage where you've designed it all. Is how do you actually get something built? And it's really tough if you're not a technical co-founder. If you know how to code, that's great. Skip this. Skip the next couple seconds here. But if you're not, the best way is to find a technical co-founder. Another best way is to learn to code. 12 years ago, I was not a developer. I was trying to, run a software business. And eventually I was like, screw it. I got to learn how to code. Find a best friend who codes. There's some great AI tools out there. Find moonlighters, developers that are working at corporate enterprises but just want to do something fun in the nights and work on a new startup, or work with a startup dev shop too as well. Some dev shop that's uniquely customized to get you to that early product without you spending hundreds and thousands of dollars. The worst solutions, in our opinion, low code, no code is great for testing desirability, but now once you're actually trying to test feasibility and actually build it, low code, no code can have a lot of constraints to it. International freelancers are great, but we've used them a lot. Staying up late hours is tough. Large dev shops are great, but they're not really built for the speed of startups. They're really built for the speed of enterprise development, which has a much more requirements for quality and testing and all these things. And then swarms of interns too. They can be great, but you got to train them and you got to handhold them and all those things. So
yeah, everything in the worst has its place. Like you said, low code, no code, just to get something scrappy on that metaphorical piece of paper, just to see, help you validate. But it's not what you would want to build your business on top of most of the time. International freelancers can be great, but by gosh, they do require a lot of management, like project management and vetting and having a good relationship. But when you have great relationships with those, they can work out awesome, but it's hard to get there. Large dev shops, I love what you said there, because there's amazing dev shops doing amazing things, but you have to be fit into their right customer profile. And we see this all the time where they will take your money. If someone comes in with hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, they would more than happy, as a salesperson myself, be like, heck yeah, this is going to be great. But they may not actually be the right fit for you. And most of the time when you're just building an MVP, they're almost never the right fit for you. And I don't know. I never really used interns, so I don't have anything to comment on that front.
Yeah, the large dev shops, they'll build you a beautiful product, and there will be no bugs in it. But the problem is that if it's not the right product, if you went too fast and you didn't, validate and stuff too as well, um, it's not going to be useful to you as well. So
Yeah. Well, if the average startup pivots 3.6 times, you're going to be 3.6 iterations away from when you sign that contract to what you actually get to where you are. And that's kind of the biggest thing.
we get asked a lot, right? What technology stack should we go with? At this early stage, we like to think whatever is going to, get the job done the fastest and the most professionally. We see a lot of companies that will rip out their code and replace large portions of their code or entire tech stacks. Our company, we replaced entire tech stacks from one version to the other because we found a better way to do things as well. So, but how do you pick a good tech stack? If you're working with someone technical, usually you're going to go with what they're best at and what they're fastest at. There's also some good resources, like you can go to the Google Stack Overflow Developer Survey, and you can see what the most common technology stacks are. So if you're looking to find or hire or recruit or choose a tech stack, you can look at job posts in the area too as well and see, in certain geographical regions, there will be, more Microsoft developers versus, who are doing .NET. In other regions, it's going to be more Node.js or Python developers too as well. So picking a tech stack that has a lot of local developers that understand that tech stack is always a good advantage.
I feel like that is one of the most underrated things is, again, what if this works out and you do need to build a team? Is there talent? Can you find people around you who can actually use what you've built and grow upon it? Or are you going to find that like perfect technical co-founder or that perfect first developer, but then they're going to have to rip and replace everything because they don't know any of the stuff that you've already built upon?
And then software lifecycle too as well. So there's a lot of confusion here too as well of like, all right, what is an MVP? How far does an MVP get you? What is a prototype? Like what's an alpha beta? Like what does a release look like? So we've started outlining some of these here. We'll put the link to this actual packet if you want to dive deeper into some of these, but just a good distinction of like the difference between a prototype versus, an MVP. So a prototype is usually more of a proof of concept, something that, you're probably more at like the, feasibility stage for a prototype, really testing out like, all right, can we build this? A lot of times you might throw away the prototype too as well because you've tested it, but then you realize that, through that learning process, there's a better way, there's a better language, a better person to help you do that.
And these are usually building off of other tools, like you talked about, like taking X and taking Y to just try to stitch them together. That's a perfect thing to do in the prototype stage, but you wouldn't actually want to start putting your reputation on the line on that scaffolding.
Yep. Yeah, and then MVP is just having just enough features to satisfy early adopters and starting to gather their feedback. An MVP could be just a single feature that is that unique enough feature that all the other products don't have, that customers are willing to start trying out. And then you get into alpha. Alpha is usually an early release to customers. Beta is also another kind of early release where you're testing out. And then the actual release is where you're like, all right, we got something here. It works as well. So, okay, the next thing, feasibility. So how do you know that you feasibly built something that is going to work for people? And the best way we talk about is usability testing. And we have a completely separate video on usability testing that you can go check out. So I'm not going to dive into that, a ton, but usability testing is simply testing the software, with a person of below average skill in your ideal customer profile and listening to them and watching them use the product and listening to them speak out loud about the product and see what you say. Watch them fail, and use those experiences to see, did you hit the mark on this? What do you need to build next, as well? So, like I said, we've got way more on this on a different video, but this is the kind of key ending stage of kind of testing feasibility. The last stage, profitability. Can you repeatedly do this with a good margin? So again, the checklist for this is you're still only addressing one key audience, one problem, one feature. You've built a product that people want, and it has really good profit margins. Ideally, you want to be in software like 70 to 90% profit margins. And then you've spent still less than 60% of your cash on hand. And it's like, why not more? Well, the idea is you still could be pivoting. You still could be building out additional features as well. These are some great quotes we love of, if you're not embarrassed by your first release, you've released too late. And then also most companies don't hit that product market fit on their first idea. So like we said, the idea of conserving enough cash to make multiple swings at that bat. And another big area at this level is that, we are under the assumption that if we build it, they will come. And that is not the case too as well. Tanner can probably talk about this for hours, but we made a clear and conscious effort to make sure that we were spending 50% of our time, human resources, and money on sales and marketing. Things that had nothing to do with our actual product development, but were getting out our brand, getting out our name, and getting out our word.
This is by far one of the hardest things. If you're a technical founder, you love building. And oftentimes a lot of founders, they will build something and just assume everyone comes, and it doesn't. They'll just move on to the next thing rather than giving it the love. But ironically, if you're a sales-oriented founder, you don't have the capability to build it. So again, this is where building the right team and finding the right partners and the right resources is very, very important, because it just shows that it's very rare that you can do it alone. It's very rare that you can strike lightning in the right spot at the right time. So most of it just comes with a lot of grit, determination. And that's very much kind of the theme that we've kind of talked about here, where, it's doing the work, doing the research, finding the customers, finding the right niche, and then just being in the right place when the right time hits that you can capitalize on it. And it's difficult, and that's why not everybody does it, or a very, very small percentage of the population become founders. But man, is it rewarding when you can do. And if something does become profitable, those are the stories that, everyone wants to reach towards.
Yeah. And it takes time and patience. I mean, it seems like early on you're getting nowhere and going nowhere. But what you're doing is you're building up a brand and building up a following for later on when people need that service and they just show up at your door. They just send you an email, you get sent a referral, and you're like, oh, so.
Yeah. And the other part of that too, that goes with actually building fundraising and stuff as well. You get a reputation, and we know so many VCs and people in the investment community that are that will invest on the founder and their belief systems. So just because your idea might not be super sexy or be super cool, and we talked about how you have to kind of leave your ego at the door. If you're onto something that believe that you're the person that can execute on it, you can do that. Compared to, you might have the best idea in the world, but if you don't have that reputation to get your foot into the door, it's going to be a lot harder. So again, just do the work, put in the time, get rolling on it. And it's okay to fail, because the majority of startups do fail. I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but it's got to be insanely high.
Yeah. And I always like to comment on that, because they talk about the statistics of startups that fail, but the reality is that there's a very high rate of products that actual fail. Mm-hmm. And if you only have the stamina to do one product in your life and it fails and you're done, then yeah, you're gonna have likely success. But entrepreneurs that take that are on their second or third or even fourth company, eventually those succeed. They have a much higher rate, the ones that are actually sticking with it, company over company. I mean, they're like the PayPal guys. A lot of those guys were on their fourth company, two or three that had previously failed prior to this before they hit PayPal, which was a massive success. And then after PayPal, all four of those founders then went off and they started their own billion-dollar business too as well. They kept going even after they had made a ton of money on PayPal. So
Yeah, yeah, you don't want to view failure as a bad thing. You just want to fail relatively quickly because you don't want to be spending a lot of time, money, and energy, and most importantly, time, I would say, on a product that is going nowhere. And I go back to that statistic at the very beginning of, the average startup pivots 3.6 times. So the idea you're going in with, by all means, is going to not be the product that you're going to end up with at the end. And so you're going into it for the journey, not for the result. And so that's one of the things you have to look at is like be open-minded, take criticism, gather as much information you can, be scrappy, be a little aggressive when you need to on certain things because you're fighting for your life out there and you're fighting for your product's life out there. And if it's not working out, move on to the next thing, but just keep on moving. That's the biggest part of it.
Yep. And that's it. So hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. We'll put our contact below if you ever want to get in touch with us, ask us further questions. We have more great presentations like this on our CodeBuddy website under the library section. You can check out our YouTube channel too as well.
All right. Well, awesome, Devin. Thanks for putting this all together and sharing it today. And we will see everybody next time. Bye-bye.